Hey, it's Kevin from KDW Mixing and Mastering. I thought I'd do a bit of a video about moving from a Mac to PC. This is specifically, well, not specifically, but mainly around for, a DAW, recording, mixing, etc. If you've seen anything in my blogs recently, I've just recently gone through that process. I've built myself a PC tower. I was running things off a MacBook Pro. I'm still using that MacBook Pro for remote sessions and just things where I need to do stuff out of the studio. But I needed to get a bit more grunt and run some specific software that ran on Windows. So I thought, well, I'll build a tower with lots of power, etc. And I thought I'd just highlight some of the things that I've picked up along the way, going through that process, just some of the differences. So these are just some of the things that were key that I found going through the process, and some of these may not apply to you, some of them may. One of the first things I noticed when I moved over to it was that my speakers going through my audio interface, I've got a Focusrite external interface. It's running on Firewire, and it would click on and off, during the day. You'd hear the speakers clicking, switching, doing things, and it sounded like it was switching sample rates and all this sort of stuff. So one thing that I did do, which has seemed to have cut that down, it still does it occasionally when some programs run. I don't know what they do. Like some of the backup software, when they're automatically running, I'll hear them click when they start and stop through the speakers. So that unless they're stopping a process that's causing that to happen. But to cut it down happening so much, if you go to your sound settings, what you can do is disable anything that you're not using for a start. That's the first thing I do is, they're not plugged in. But if you've got some stuff that you're not using, then I would disable it. And the other thing you want to do is, so if you know what you're running your audio interface at, so for instance mine, I'm running at 44.1, okay. So what you do is you go into the properties of each one and go to advanced, and then change them all 24-bit 44.1 and take off the exclusive as well. Okay, so I would just disable everything that's not being used. And anything that is being used for something, change the settings to be what your audio interface is set to. Just like that. Now, when you think you've done all of that, and that's in playback, what you need to be aware is you need to do the same thing in the record section, but it's only going to apply to something that is actually active. So in this case, if I was to enable that, you could come in and also again set that setting, take the exclusive off, but in this case I'm going to disable it. And if you do all of that, that should cut down the amount of popping and clicking that happens. Another thing, just a visual thing that I had to get used to, if you've been using a Mac for a while, you'll know how the interface looks. It's, slick and whatever else, but I've noticed this is Windows 8. Some of these borders are absolutely massive, and just visually it takes a little bit getting used to. They just seem to take up so much space. You'll see the Cubase sort of frame here. You lose quite a bit of screen real estate just with this menu and border. In a Mac it's quite a lot smaller, a lot neater. Another thing to be aware of is, if you're running Cubase, it's okay. You'll get multiple. Cubase has the ability to run multiple window interfaces, so you can move your mix window around on any screen. So if you're running multiple screens, you've got two monitors, you can move it around onto two monitors, and you can have the edit screen on one, the mix on the other, and you just have this border up here like this. Okay, if you are running Pro Tools, let me just open it up. Now you'll see you'll see on my screen here, because I've got two monitors, I've got one above the other. You'll see there's no menu there. Just ignore this error. You'll see there's no menu there because it is stretched onto the second screen. So Pro Tools is a weird one to use because you have to stretch this window across all of your monitors to get, say, your mix window on one screen and edit on another, project space, or plugins, etc. You've got to stretch that. Now, if you're coming from a Mac world, you don't need to do that. Pro Tools operates independently. It has independent windows and everything else. So that's just another thing to be aware of with Windows, is this screen. I really wish Pro Tools would fix that and make the system more independent, more like a Mac, but they haven't done it. Another thing to be aware of is, especially if you're coming from something like a MacBook, you probably would have been recording on potentially an external hard disk. Now, if you were doing that on a Mac and it was an external hard disk, then there's a good chance that it's been formatted at using the Mac format of HFS plus. So when you take this over to Windows, unless you get third-party programs, it won't be able to read or write to them. So it's probably a good idea to, if you're going to permanently move to a Windows solution, is to back up all those projects onto another hard drive, or get another hard drive, format it to NTFS, and then move your projects across to that and start using that in Windows. And then you just use a HFS plus drive for your Mac system. But I would assume that most people are going to use either a Mac or Windows and not usually use both. So I would go with the format that suits. They seem to perform the best having the right one. So Windows performs best on NTFS and a Mac performs best on HFS plus. Okay, anybody that's coming from a Mac world knows, that if you just have your system, it's a pre-built system, and you have your OS on it, whether it's Mavericks or whatever version it is, you install it, you do some updates every now and then, and it's very, very simple. You don't have to worry about every little thing. The one thing that you have to worry about with the Windows system, and this is the big thing, especially when you're first setting it up, is you put your OS on, in this case Windows 8, and then you do update, 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 and you do updates, and you could do updates for days to get it up to spec, and up to date. Okay. Then you've got to worry about all the drivers. So you've got to know what video card you've put in your system, and you've got to get the drivers for that update, and then you've got to update drivers for your sound card, and update drivers for this, that, and everything else. And it's just something you need to be aware of with Windows. You need to keep your drivers updated, but also be careful, because sometimes some of these updates do break your system. So, always have backup of your system, and don't do updates just for the sake of updates, especially if you're doing a lot of busy work at the time and you've got deadlines, etc., save your updates for a specific time. Make sure you've got a process, you've got it well backed up. Do your updates, and then if there's anything that goes wrong, that it's one of those backups, one of those updates you've done that day, and you can back them out, or roll back through your backup. But it is one sort of item that you need to be aware of with Windows, is constantly looking at driver updates and system updates. That you just don't have to do that much with a Mac. It just looks after itself. Now, the other thing you need to do with Windows, which you don't have to do really much of with a Mac, the Mac just seems to run. And this is not I'm not praising a Mac here or saying which one's better, just stating my experience. And I've moved to a PC, so you want to criticize me for claiming that a Mac system works better, then so be it, but I'm on a PC right now. But the Mac does just work. You don't have to do much tuning to it. You just keep minimal software running and just keep things a little bit clean, and it works fine. PC, when you build the PC and you want to run it as a DAW, there's a fair bit of tuning that you have to do and playing around. So one of the first things you'll find you'll do, and we'll go into the control panel, is you'll want to play with your power settings. Now, obviously the OS installs itself, and it sets itself to a balanced power because it's basing it on a normal use by everybody else, where it wants to go to sleep or run the CPU and turn low and turn the hard disk off when you're not doing much, or you're just surfing the web. But if you're using this as a DAW, then whenever you're using it, you're pretty much using it full on, and it needs lots of power, and you don't want it to be stopping and starting and turning hard disks off in the middle of things, etc. So what you'd normally do is change your settings over to high performance. Go in here. You can have your display turn off or not. I have it set to turn off just because, I'm always moving the mouse anyway, so it won't go to sleep. The screen won't turn off. And when I'm not using it, I want the screen to go off. I set it to never go to sleep. I've never liked PCs that go to sleep. They just never wake up cleanly, correctly. There's always things go wrong. If I want the thing to go to sleep, then I'd prefer to shut the whole system down and then start it up afresh. It just comes up a lot neater. There's just so many problems and little bugs, etc., when things go to sleep and come out of sleep and try to resume from where they were. So I don't let this sleep. Then I go into the advanced settings here, and we set the hard disk to never turn off, and just set various things. A lot of this stuff doesn't really matter, but maximum performance. Don't worry about that. It's only if you're running wireless. Maximum performance. The sleep we've already said. USB selective suspend I set to disable. If you're running any USB devices, you don't want them to suspend, etc. The power button on the lid, don't worry about that. Just the PCI Express power management setting off. This is probably the key one, the processor, just to stop the CPU fluctuating, going up and down, trying to slow down at various times, etc. Set your minimum to 100%. Set the cooling to active so that if it does start to get a bit hot, it will start to do some things with it and adjust the fans, etc. And obviously your maximum stays at 100. In a balanced setting, that would be sitting at 5 or 10%, so that when it's quiet, it'll slow the processor down. But in this situation, you want it sitting at 100. Another thing, I wanted to get rid of some of these items that are sitting here running, so I went through here and just determined what was sitting here. Spare graphics cards, disable. Webcam, disable. COM ports, disable. Print queues, I'm not printing from this, so I disable it. Onboard audio interfaces, disable them if I don't need them. Just to keep things going like that. Now, with USB devices, so if you come into here, so this is the device manager, sorry, I should have said that. And if you go to your USB settings, go to properties, you'll find power management here. Now these are usually ticked to allow the computer to turn these off to save power. I untick all of these and then just click OK. And that'll prevent the system from turning these off, especially if you've got, you've got audio interfaces plugged into USB or other things like that. You don't want the system turning them off. So I go through each one of these settings, just find any that has that power management setting and untick and OK. Another place you want to look at is in the system. So if we go into system and we go advanced settings. Okay, so if you're in advanced, then you go to performance and settings here. What they recommend, and this comes from both Cubase and Pro Tools websites, is to go over to the advanced tab here, and default is programs, just change that to background services. The other thing that I do is I go into the virtual memory, and normally Windows will allocate a page file based on what it feels. I think it does a calculation on your RAM, etc. I don't really want it to be adjusting things and changing as it boots up, so I've actually gone in and I've set a custom size, and I've just put a figure in there. It's going to depend on how much RAM you have in your system and whether you need that page file. I've just set it to 4096 initial size and maximum size, so it doesn't grow and it doesn't start off small and grow. It just sets that whole size and it's done, and it's set on the C drive. It's not automatically doing it, and it's just there every time. Okay, so if you go to the task manager and you go over to startup, this is moved in Windows 8. You want to go through all of these things that are set to start when your PC boots. Now, there's a lot of things that you may not necessarily need, and I like to disable them. For instance, what have I disabled here? I have Evernote on here. I've disabled the Evernote clipper. I've disabled the iTunes helper. Even though I have iTunes on here, I just disabled the helper. I've disabled the Java update scheduler. QuickTime task, disabled that. I've disabled Spotify web helper. So a lot of applications put a lot of things that start up on boot and they just sit there running all the time. Now there are obviously some applications here that you will need to have running. If you're running Acronis for your backup software, you'll want the scheduler there if you've scheduled stuff. And Softube Console 1, you need that running. If you've got a trackball like mine, you'll need that running. So there's certain things that will have to run, but just go through and just find some of these ones that really are pretty useless and I don't really care for, and disable them so they won't start when you boot your system up. That'll keep as little as possible running as you can. Okay, so one other thing you will probably find can be useful as well in the Windows thing. With a Mac, you don't usually worry about the hard drives or anything else, but in Windows they always talk about defragging. The hard disks get fragmented, where they put little packets of data scattered all over the drive and they're not running efficiently. So I like to schedule this little tool here. It's free. It's called Oslogic's Disk Defragger. And I think I schedule it for once a week to just go through and optimize and defrag the hard drives. So it just keeps all the data contiguous on the hard drive and makes the access to that data a lot faster and a lot more efficient. Obviously, the other big change when you're going from a Mac to a PC is, I guess, the keyboard. There's obviously some subtle things. Windows has got a Windows button. The Control key, Mac's got a Command key. Your Alt or Option is Alt on a PC. You just need to be aware of that. With my system, I did think about using my Bluetooth Mac keyboard with the PC, but I ended up getting a Logitech Wallace one because I just didn't want that confusion of constantly thinking about what button I was pressing and was I pressing Control or Command or. So you need to get used to that, but that's not that difficult. One thing that I love about the Apple system is Time Machine. Never had to think about backups with Time Machine. With Apple, you just get yourself an external hard drive, plug it in. Time Machine says, do you want to use it as a backup? And you say yes, and it starts backing up. And it constantly backs up. Now, sometimes you have to pause those backups if you're in sessions and you don't want it to interrupt, etc. But it just backs up. Now, I could be wrong here, but Windows doesn't seem to have that situation. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe I've just missed it. But anyway. So what I did was, and unfortunately you got to purchase this, but I like to use a Acronis True Image. So I just have an external hard drive, and I've just configured this to back up my main C drive where the OS is, and I have it back up every day. It is, I'm trying to remember what settings I had. I have it set up backing up every day, and I've actually used the version change scheme, so it does some full backups, then it does some partials, and then it does some more fulls, some more partials, and keeps collapsing the data over time, and keeping it nice and up to date, so you can incrementally go back versions, etc. And it seems to work pretty well. It's a pity that Microsoft really hasn't, and again, maybe I'm wrong, somebody can tell me that I'm wrong, that Microsoft hasn't implemented something as neat and as good as Time Machine was, or is. They really should just have that. You shouldn't have to buy third-party backup software just to back up your OS. Now, if you're doing videos on YouTube like I'm doing right now, I was so used to using ScreenFlow on a Mac. So when I built the PC, I thought, oh, what am I going to use instead of ScreenFlow? ScreenFlow was so efficient. It just worked. It was cheap. Yeah, it was great. So I looked at options on Windows, and they'll come back to the best one as being Camtasia. But if you've had a look online, Camtasia, it's like $400 or something ridiculous. And just to do something basic like what I'm doing, it's not worth that money. So I looked at some other cheaper options, tried a few things. Some just didn't work. Some were just terrible. So what I'm running with this one right now, and I'm still trialing this out. I haven't quite been sold yet, but I'm running, it's a free thing. It's from Microsoft Expression Encoder, and it's a piece of software that's more than just a screen capture, but it includes a screen capture component. So I'm using that, and it seems to work well. It does create a sort of proprietary file called an XESC, I think it is, file, which you then use the encoder within it to run, to convert it to a WMV file or something like that to upload to YouTube. But I did also find that if you don't want to use their encoder and you just want to use the screen capture and then go and edit in some other software or something like that, you can actually use a free tool called Handbrake, and it will actually read the screen capture file that the expression encoder creates, and you can convert it to an MP4 or whatever you want with Handbrake. Okay, so specifically with DAW software on a PC, just to get set up, I'm not going to go through all the details of that, but one thing to note if you are moving from a Mac and PC is you can copy a lot of the profile settings across. So for instance, you can go to your Mac in your documents there and you can find presets, etc. for Steinberg. You can copy all those across to Windows. You just need to work out the different paths. Same with Pro Tools. You can copy across track presets, your session templates. You can copy all them across. And there's various locations. So you've got your documents folder, but there's also spots within the in the user app data roaming. You'll find some spots there where there's settings as well, especially for the Steinberg one. If you go to Cubase 8, you will see lots of XML files here that you can back up, project templates. They're all hidden in there. So you just need to take whatever data you can find off your Mac and you can copy it in here and see what you get and what you're missing. And when you start working on your sessions, etc., you'll start going, oh, I'm missing that preset. You've still got access to your Mac. You can then go and grab those presets and put them in and find the right spot to put them in. So don't worry about losing all your presets because you can get them across and all your settings and Windows settings, etc. Probably the last thing I've got on my list is, and this is probably more of an annoyance than anything, is the VST plugin locations. On the Mac, the VST plugins seem to all go in a consistent place. Pretty much they were all either in one folder or two folders. They were just in their spots. I found in Windows, after installing lots of plugins, they end up everywhere. And to move them all, to consolidate, is hard because some programs won't let you move. Like if you move them, they break. For instance, look on my C drive here. We've got this plugin right on the root of C, VST plugins, and that's there because a Zebra plugin from Yuhi had to put data in that folder. There was nowhere else to put it. It had to put it in there. If you moved it, it broke. So you'll find when you install these plugins, they all use a different path to put the VST. So I got to the point where I would copy the path that I wanted them to go in and keep pasting them in. The other confusing part is when you've got 32-bit plugins, you've got 64-bit plugins, you've got VST3, VST2, they all go in different spots. Your 32-bit plugins generally will go into the program files x86, but I have found them go in spots in common files. There's a VST3 there in common files. They will also go under Steinberg. The non-VST3 ones you'll find under Program Files x86 VST plugins. You'll find some there. Now some of these I've manually copied across to that place just to keep it neat because they put them all over the place. So you'll find there programs Steinberg. There's a VST folder there, and some applications have put their plugins in there. And then you go across to your program files for your 64-bit, and you go to common files, and you'll find, well, Pro Tools puts their files in there. Then you'll find a VST3 folder there. Then you go into Steinberg. No, not there. If you then come down here again, see now there's another VST plugin. So there's all these plugins there. And then there's a Steinberg folder. And in Cubase 8, there is a VST plugins folder where it stores its VST plugins and its VST3 plugins. And then if you've got Wavelab, it likes to store files in another spot. That's one thing I found very confusing. On a Mac, it keeps it all nice and structured. All the applications seem to install them in the one or two folders. On a PC, it just seems to be put it anywhere you want. That can be quite confusing when if you go into Cubase and you want it to find all these plugins, and you go to your plugin manager, you can add lots and lots of paths. And that's for VST2s. That's the other thing to think of too, which I found especially with Cubase, is the VST3 plugins may get installed in funny places, but you can't put a path in for them because that's only for VST2. So you need to make sure that you move your VST3 plugins into one of these VST3 folders that are already there that Steinberg have created. You need to put them in one of those because that's the only way Steinberg's going to find them. So that's just a little bit of an annoyance, but it's something to get used to. And every time I install a new plugin now, I've got to be conscious of, instead of just clicking next to install, I've got to look at the path. Where is it installing it? And also, unticking 32-bit plugins so they don't get installed at all if I don't want to run 32-bit plugins, because I like to keep mine neat. I hate having multiple versions of the same plugin sitting there that, Cubase sees 3 versions of one plugin. It sees a VST3, it sees a VST2, it sees a 32-bit version and a 64-bit version. So generally, if a plugin has a VST3 version, I will untick everything and just install the VST3 version, 64-bit. If it doesn't have a 64-bit VST3, then I'll install 64-bit VST2. That's generally how I do it, just to keep it neat. I just want to see one plugin, one version of the plugin, and have it work. Okay, hopefully that has helped. The process was quite long to set up and change over to this, and I'm still tuning it, and I'm still finding things missing, etc. But all in all, it has worked quite well, and it hasn't been a total disaster, and I'm quite happy with the setup right now. And I'm just adjusting it as I work with it to see how things function, and just doing the final little tweaks of things here and there. So if you're planning on doing this, it is doable, but it will take your time and it will take effort. Don't think you're going to rush into it and get it done instantly, because it's not, and it's going to depend on how complicated your system was in the first place. So hopefully this has helped you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.